The coffee mug warmed my palms as I stood on the front porch, watching fat snowflakes drift down through the bare branches of the oak trees. The stillness of the world around me was almost sacred, just the soft crunch of my boots in the snow and Barnaby's quiet breathing at my feet. I leaned against the railing, feeling the weight of the silence settle in my chest. It had been 2 years since I'd left it all behind. 2 years since I'd stopped pretending that my family's absence didn't sting. The loneliness had been suffocating at times, but it had also been freeing. This place, Blackwood Manor, was mine. It was the fortress I'd built for myself, the one place I could finally be untouched by the ghosts of the past. The world was quiet enough that I almost didn't hear it at first. The rumble of engines broke the silence like a clap of thunder. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. 2 black SUVs and a massive U-Haul truck barreled up the narrow lane, their tires spitting slush and gravel. A chorus of engine roars loud enough to rattle the trees. They came to a screeching halt at my wrought iron gate, the exhaust clouding the cold air. My heart lurched into my throat. I was already running before the first door opened. Dad stepped out first, adjusting his wool coat as if he were arriving at some country club event. His grin, that smile spread across his face like he was winning some grand prize. I hated that smile. It was the same one he'd worn 6 years ago, when he'd convinced me to sign his business loan, the one I was still paying off, the one that had pushed me to the edge of bankruptcy. Felix jumped out next, his boots crunching against the snow as he barked orders at the men unloading the truck. Careful with those server racks. Don't scratch the casings. He didn't even look at me. Didn't acknowledge my existence as he directed them to start unloading right there on the curb, blocking the entire street. "What are you doing here?" I called out, my voice smaller than I intended, but it didn't matter. My legs were already shaking. Barnaby, who had been peacefully asleep at my feet, stirred and pressed against my legs. I felt his low whine building in his chest, a nervous vibration that matched my own. Declan's smile only widened. "Harper, Sweether, we're home. Home." The word hit me like a fist to the stomach. 2 years. 2 years of grinding away at my career, pouring everything into my work and saving every cent of my $300,000 bonus to buy this place, Blackwood Manor. I'd kept it anonymous, everything in the name of the Oakhaven Heritage Trust, hidden from them, hidden from my family. I'd done everything right. Changed my number, kept my address off every database, used a P.O. box in the next town over for my mail. I'd been so careful, so meticulous. But now they were here. How did you know I was here? I gripped the gate's iron bars, every inch of me screaming to run, to escape. But I was trapped. Trapped by my own blood. Dad pointed casually to the tree line across the street. "I parked right over there for 14 hours yesterday. Watched you walk the dog at 7:30. Saw your Volvo in the drive. Saw you leave for the grocery store. Came back alone." His voice dropped, as if he were explaining some kind of trivial detail, like a neighbor talking about the weather. "I know you're all alone in this big house, Harper. That's no way to live." His words crawled across my skin, each one a venomous suggestion that I couldn't escape. This wasn't just a visit. This wasn't some friendly attempt at reconciliation. No, this was reconnaissance. This was tactical. This was them closing in on their prize. "I told you, you need to leave," I said, forcing steel into my voice. I couldn't back down now. This is private property. You're not welcome here. Felix finally turned to look at me, his eyes cold with contempt. "Harper, don't be dramatic. We're family." He gestured at the server racks being stacked on the curb, as if his actions alone would justify the invasion. "I've got a business to run. The lease is already signed." "What lease?" I demanded. Declan pulled a folded document from his coat pocket, waving it like a flag of truce. "Felix is renting your basement," he said, his voice too calm, too rehearsed. "Very reasonable terms. 1 a month for 5 years. You signed it last month, remember?" The world tilted. The ground shifted beneath me. I never signed anything. Not a thing, your signature's right there, sweetheart, Declan continued, as if reading the disbelief written all over my face. I'm sure you remember. I didn't open the gate. I didn't move. Every instinct I'd spent the last 2 years building screamed at me that this was a trap. That opening the gate even an inch would be the end of everything. The smile faded from Declan's face. He pulled out his phone, pressing it to his ear without even a second glance at me. His voice dropped into a murmur. 20 minutes later, I saw the locksmith's van pull up. A middle-aged man in coveralls stepped out, toolbox in hand. He was about to reach the gate when Declan intercepted him, showing his head with a smile that could only be described as the patronizing kind. I'm her father, Declan said, loud enough for me to hear. I live here. My daughter's having a mental health crisis. She's locked herself inside and won't let anyone in. We're worried sick about her. I could feel the walls closing in. The locksmith glanced between us, taking in the concern written across my father's face, the worry in his voice. He nodded, barely acknowledging my presence as he stepped closer. You need to stay away from the gate, I shouted, panic rising in my chest. This is my property. He doesn't live here. He's lying. But the locksmith had already moved forward, the drill in his hand screeching through metal. And when it cut through the gate, it was like the sound of every boundary I'd ever set being torn apart. The drill's whining was deafening. The locksmith's hands shook as he worked, his movements mechanical, like he'd done this 100 times before. I stood frozen at the gate, unable to move. My body shaking with adrenaline, my breath shallow and rapid. I was watching it all unfold, helpless, as my father smiled, satisfied that his plan was working. The gate swung open with a metallic screech, and Declan stepped forward, still wearing that same, condescending smile. There we go, he said, glancing over at me. Everything's taken care of now. You'll be fine. Didn't respond. What could I say? He was here. They were here. And in the blink of an eye, my hard, one piece, the life I'd carefully built for myself, was slipping through my fingers. Felix was the first one through the gate. He pushed past me without so much as a glance, barely acknowledging my presence, his eyes already scanning the property. His eyes glinted with something I couldn't place. Satisfaction, maybe, or maybe it was just greed. Whatever it was, it made my skin crawl. Come on, he called to the workers, who were unloading server racks from the truck. Let's get this stuff inside. My legs wobbled as I stood there, still gripping the gate's iron bars like a lifeline. Barnaby whined at my feet. His hackles raised as if he could sense the danger, too. His old bones were tense with fear, and I could feel him pressing into my legs for support. I forced myself to speak. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the words thick with disbelief. Declan's eyes softened, but only for a moment. We're family, Harper. We've been worried about you. His tone was patronizing, like he was comforting a child, but I saw the truth behind it. This wasn't about family. This wasn't about me. It was about control, and they were taking it back, piece by piece. My head spun. My father was standing there, calm, in complete control of the situation. Felix barked orders to the men unloading the truck, moving with the efficiency of someone who had already claimed this place as his own. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to shout, to scream, to throw open the door and make them leave. But every time I opened my mouth, my voice failed me. It was too small, too weak. You need to leave, I said again, trying to force some authority into my voice. I straightened my back, pushing past the knot of fear tightening in my chest. This is my house. You're not welcome here. Felix paused long enough to give me a glance, his face twisted in a mix of pity and disdain. Harper, he said, shaking his head, you're being dramatic. We're family. This is just business. I clenched my fists. This was not business. This was theft. My heart pounded as I looked at the pile of equipment on the curb. My house, my home, was being invaded by strangers who had no right to be here. But there was nothing I could do. Declan's voice cut through my thoughts. You signed the lease, he said, holding up the document, the one I had never seen before, never signed. His smirk was maddening. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, sweetheart. You know I'm right." The paper shook in my hands as I reached for it. The signature on the page looked like mine. It was mine, in some twisted way. But I hadn't signed anything. I had never agreed to this. I hadn't even seen this document. My stomach turned as I stared at it. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the floor dropping out from under my feet. "I never signed this," I whispered. "This is forged." Declan ignored me, folding the paper up with a casual flick. "You'll get used to it, Harper. Things are going to be different now." His smile was like a knife, cutting through the last shred of hope I had left. The world around me felt like it was tilting. My breath came in short bursts, my chest tightening. I couldn't breathe. Felix's voice broke through the haze. "The truck's loaded up, Dad. Let's move this inside." I wanted to stop him, to scream, to fight back, but my legs wouldn't move. My body felt numb, as if I were trapped in some nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. But the nightmare was real, and I was losing everything. Without another word, Declan turned his back on me and walked toward the house. Felix followed, and the workers trailed behind, lugging their equipment like they were already part of the family, already part of the plan. I couldn't let them in. I couldn't let them take over. Not without a fight. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my fingers shaking. "Oak Haven Police," I said, my voice cracking. "I need an officer at Blackwood Manor. My family is here. They're trying to take my home. Please, I need help." I slammed the phone down when I heard the officer's voice on the other end, the sound of it too distant, too formal. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to lose everything again. But I had no choice now. The door slammed behind me as I stepped into the house, my heart still racing from the confrontation at the gate. I could hear Felix and Declan inside, barking orders like they owned the place. It was no longer a question of if they would take control, but when. Barnaby was at my heels, his paws scratching against the wood floor as he trotted into the entryway. I bent down, scratching behind his ears, trying to calm myself, to steady my breath. But my thoughts were all over the place. I had to act fast. I had to do something. I reached for my phone, my hands still shaking, and dialed Sterling's number. My lawyer, the only person who could help me navigate this mess. The phone rang once, then twice before Sterling picked up, his voice crisp and efficient as always. "Harper. I'm guessing this isn't a social call." I could barely get the words out. "Sterling, my family's here." I paused, trying to collect myself. "They're claiming I signed a lease. Felix is moving in. They're trying to take over the house. They've got forged documents, and now they've got locksmiths breaking in. I don't know what to do." There was a pause on the other end, then the sound of paper shuffling. "All right, listen to me. First things first. Do you have the lease they're talking about?" I shook my head. "I haven't seen it before. I never signed anything. But it looks like my signature. I don't know what to do." "Calm down," Sterling said. His voice was steady, reassuring. "Get a copy of that lease. If they've got it, we need to look at it. You can't just let them take control. Not without proof. I'm trying to get a copy. I just can't think straight with all this happening." "I understand. But I need you to stay calm. You're going to need that document to make your case. And while you're at it, get photos. Document everything, every piece of evidence that shows they're trying to move in illegally." I paced back and forth, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I could hear Declan laughing from the other room, his voice oozing that smug confidence that made my skin crawl. They were treating this like a done deal. But it wasn't. I wouldn't let it be. I took a deep breath and turned to Barnaby, who was lying on the floor now, his head on his paws, eyes following me. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered, kneeling down to stroke his fur. "We've got to get through this." After hanging up with Sterling, I felt a slight sense of clarity. I needed to get that lease. I needed to make sure I had proof they were lying, that they had no right to be here. I rushed upstairs to my office, my mind spinning as I rifled through my drawers, looking for any trace of that damned lease. It had to be here. It had to be a mistake. There was no way I had signed anything. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. My hands were still shaking as I flipped through files, pulling out contracts, old papers, anything that could hold the answer. Nothing. I was about to give up when I spotted it, folded neatly under a stack of architectural designs. My breath caught in my throat as I unfolded the paper. It was the lease. The one Declan had waved in my face. My name was on it. The signature was unmistakable. It looked like my handwriting. But I knew with every ounce of my being that I hadn't signed it. I hadn't been in town when it was supposedly signed. I had been at a conference in Boston, miles away. This was a forgery. They had to have forged it. I grabbed my phone again, dialing 911 this time, desperation edging my voice. Oak Haven Police, I need to file a report. My family's trying to take over my house with a forged lease. They've broken in and are refusing to leave. I need help. As I spoke, I heard footsteps approaching. I knew it was them before I even saw them. Felix's boots thudded on the stairs, his voice muffled as he ordered one of the workers to set up equipment in the basement. My heart pounded. This wasn't just about a forgery anymore. This was a violation, a criminal act. I hung up with the dispatcher, my breath shallow as I walked toward the stairs, phone still in hand. I didn't want to face them. I didn't want to confront them. But I had no choice. Not anymore. I was done hiding, done running. This house, this life, I had built it, and I was going to keep it. I squared my shoulders and walked down the hallway. The door to the living room was ajar, and I could see Felix standing there, directing the workers. Declan was nowhere to be seen, probably in the kitchen, pretending everything was fine. Felix looked up as I entered, his face unreadable. "What's this, Harper?" he asked, his voice bored, dismissive. "You getting in the way now?" I lifted the lease, holding it in front of me like a shield. "This is forged," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "I didn't sign this." Felix scoffed. "It's legal, Harper. And you're gonna have to deal with it. You've got no choice." I took a step closer. "I'm calling the police. I'm not going to let you steal my house. Not this time." He stepped back, but only slightly. "Call them then. See how far that gets you." I turned and walked toward the door, my hand reaching for the phone again. But before I could dial, Felix moved in front of me, blocking my path. "It's over, Harper. You don't have the power anymore." I stood there, staring at him. My heart was hammering, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I had the law on my side. I had the truth. And I was going to make sure they couldn't take what was mine. I barely slept that night. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Even with Barnaby curled up beside me on the couch. I could hear the wind howling outside, rattling the windows, but inside, the stillness was suffocating. My mind wouldn't stop racing, the events of the day repeating in my head like a broken record. Felix had barely even flinched when I confronted him with the forged lease. He just stood there, calm and self-assured, like he knew everything was going to fall into place. Like he had already won. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let them take this from me. I didn't know how long I sat there in the dark, my phone still clutched in my hand. But eventually, exhaustion overtook me. I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, the first light of dawn was creeping in through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. Barnaby was awake, his ears twitching as he watched me, sensing my unease. I stood up, stretching my stiff limbs, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. I needed to think. I needed to figure out how to fight back. I'd been playing defense for so long, constantly trying to outrun my family. But now it was time to take control. I couldn't just wait for them to make the next move. I had to act. I had a plan, at least a rough one. I would call Sterling again, he'd know what to do. But first, I needed to get proof. The forged lease was just the beginning. They'd trespassed, they'd lied. And now they were occupying my property like it was their own. But what was I going to do with all that? I couldn't just throw it in their faces. I needed to build a case. I grabbed my phone and started dialing, the cold silence of the house pressing down on me. Sterling answered on the first ring. "Harper, what's going on? You okay?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying concern. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "They're here. They're trying to take the house. Felix is moving in. I've got the forged lease, but they're not backing down. I don't know what else to do." There was a pause, and then Sterling spoke. "Okay, first things first, you need to document everything. Take pictures of the lease. The signatures, the notary stamp, everything. And then we need to get the police involved, but only if you have solid evidence. We can't move forward without it." "I'm already on it," I replied, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in hours. "I'll get photos of everything. But I need them out of here, Sterling. I need to make sure they don't just walk all over me." Sterling's voice softened. "I know you do. And you will. But right now, you need to make sure you've got the legal high ground. We'll get this sorted. Just hang tight." I hung up, my mind already moving to the next step. I had to get those photos, I had to document the damage they were causing, and I had to make sure I had backup. The last thing I needed was to be alone in this fight. I grabbed my camera and went to the front door, peering out through the small crack in the curtains. Felix and Declan were out there, walking around the property like they owned it. Felix was directing some workers in the yard, and Declan was on his phone, no doubt making more plans behind the scenes. The sight of them made my blood boil, but I didn't let it show. I needed to be smart, calm. I stepped outside, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Barnaby followed me hesitantly, his old body stiff from the chill. I crouched down and scratched behind his ears, taking a moment to steady myself before I started moving. I walked over to the front gate, where I could get a clear view of the workers unloading more equipment from the truck. They were setting up some kind of industrial machinery, and I felt a pang of fear twist in my stomach. What were they planning? Why couldn't they just leave? I raised my camera and started taking pictures, focusing on the workers, the equipment, and the area around the gate. I snapped several shots, making sure I got the lease in the frame as well. Each click of the shutter felt like a small victory. It wasn't much yet, but it was something. It was evidence. I spent the next hour taking more photos, documenting everything I could. The more I worked, the more I realized just how deeply my family had planned this. They weren't just showing up unannounced. They had already made their move. They had thought of everything. Finally, when I had enough, I returned to the house, locking the door behind me. My heart was still pounding, but there was a sense of purpose now, a feeling that I was finally doing something to take back control. I sent the photos to Sterling, along with a quick message asking him to review everything. Then, I sat down at the desk and stared at my phone, waiting for him to respond. But as I waited, the silence of the house grew louder. The house that used to feel like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. And my family, the ones I had fought so hard to escape, were standing just outside, ready to tear everything down. I wasn't going to let them. I couldn't. But I knew this was only the beginning, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The workers were still outside, but the pace had slowed. It felt like they were waiting for something. Or perhaps it was just the calm before the storm. Either way, I wasn't going to sit here and wait for them to make the next move. I paced the house, each step echoing in the silence. The cold in the house was unbearable, and I kept pulling my sweater tighter around my shoulders, trying to keep warm. It was getting harder to focus. I needed to do something. I needed to make sure I wasn't just sitting here, waiting for them to take over. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through my contacts, looking for a way to buy myself some time. That's when I remembered Chase. He'd been helping me with the garden restoration project for the past year. He'd never asked for anything in return, always showing up when I needed him, and I couldn't ignore that now. I dialed his number, my fingers trembling slightly as I held the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he picked up. Harper. His voice was calm, steady, and I could tell he'd been expecting my call. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice even, as though nothing was wrong. "I think they're going to try something soon. I need you to help me reinforce the gate. Make sure they can't just walk in." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're serious?" "Chase, they've already moved in their equipment. I think they're planning to stay. I can't let them take over." "I'll be there in 20, he replied, his voice firm. I hung up, my mind already racing. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold them off. The locksmith had already drilled through the gate, and Felix had practically made himself at home. But if I could fortify the house, make it harder for them to get inside, maybe I could buy some time. Maybe I could make them see that I wasn't going to just give up. I quickly gathered a few things I might need: a flashlight, a notebook to document the damage they were causing, and a small hammer. I wasn't an expert, but I had learned enough from the renovation work to make simple repairs. The gate needed to be reinforced, and the windows needed to be checked, too. I wasn't going to let them break in without a fight. By the time Chase arrived, I had already begun scoping out the yard, checking for weak points in the fencing. He pulled up in his truck, stepping out with his usual calm demeanor, looking like he'd just walked off a job site. His truck bed was full of tools, everything we might need to reinforce the gate. "Okay," he said, surveying the scene. "Let's get to work. You've got this place locked down, right?" I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "As much as I can. I just need to make sure they can't get inside. If we can secure the gate, we might be able to slow them down." Chase didn't ask questions. He just got to work. We spent the next hour silently reinforcing the gate. Chase brought in additional materials, adding internal braces to the structure and installing a heavy-duty lock that wouldn't be easy to break. Every step, every bolt, felt like a small victory. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The gate would be stronger now, at least for the time being. And with any luck, it would give me the time I needed to call the police, to file the reports, and to make sure Sterling had all the evidence he needed. By the time we finished, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the property. The wind was biting now, making the cold feel sharper. But there was a sense of purpose in the air. For the first time today, I felt like I had the upper hand. Chase looked at me as he wiped his hands on his jeans. "You sure you're good?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure I was telling the truth. "Yeah, I'm fine. We've got the gate reinforced, and I've called for backup. Now it's just a matter of waiting. You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice low, like he was trying to be gentle with me. "I'm here, whenever you need me." His words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't used to relying on anyone. I had spent so long building walls around myself, making sure no one could get too close, that hearing those words felt almost foreign. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "I appreciate it." Chase nodded, his expression serious. "Just let me know what you need. We've got this." As he got back into his truck and drove off, I stood there, watching him disappear down the driveway. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a cold determination. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I headed back inside, checking the locks on every door. It was a small thing, but it made me feel like I had some control again. I couldn't stop thinking about the look in Felix's eyes when I confronted him earlier. He thought I would back down. He thought I would be too scared to fight for this place, for my home. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't running, and I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, starting to document everything. Every photo, every conversation, every threat. I was going to make sure that when this was all over, there was no question about who had the right to be here. As the night deepened and the wind howled outside, I finally felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Tomorrow was going to be a new day, and I wasn't going to let them steal it from me. New Year's Eve. The house felt colder than it had all week, even with the fire crackling in the hearth. I stood in the living room, watching the flames dance in the fireplace, but my mind was miles away, focused on the plan. I checked my phone again, still no word from Sterling. But I wasn't going to wait for his confirmation anymore. I had already made the calls. I had done everything I could to prepare. Tonight, my family was going to make their move, and I was ready for them. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the heater. I had told no one about the trap I was setting, not even Chase. He had helped me reinforce the gate, but tonight wasn't about the gate anymore. It was about putting the final nail in the coffin of my family's plans. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to walk into a situation they couldn't talk their way out of. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. Time was running out. The guests were arriving, filtering into the back entrance, just as I'd instructed. It was a strange sight. Some of the most influential people in town, the ones who had supported my heritage trust, walking through the side gate as though this was just another event, another party. None of them knew what was really going on. But they would soon. Chase arrived last, as I expected. He knocked lightly on the door, his face a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. I opened it, letting him in. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice quiet as he glanced around the dimly lit hallway. The house felt deserted, though the energy in the air was anything but. "I have to be," I said, taking a deep breath. "It's the only way to make them understand that they can't just take whatever they want." Chase didn't say anything. He just nodded, his eyes scanning the room. He wasn't here for me to explain anything anymore. He was here because he knew, deep down, that this was the only way forward. "You'll be fine," he said, though I could tell he was nervous for me. "And if they try anything, we'll be ready," I finished for him, giving him a small smile. "But they won't. Not this time." We both turned toward the front of the house as the clock ticked closer to midnight. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The rest of the guests were mingling, drinking champagne, talking quietly among themselves, pretending they didn't know what was really at stake. I didn't care about the small talk. I didn't care about appearances anymore. This was about making a statement. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching on the gravel. 2 cars. The same vehicles I had seen earlier in the day. Felix's SUV, Declan's truck, and the third vehicle that always trailed behind them, Tiffany, holding the camera. The one who would make sure this went viral. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. They were here. I glanced over at Chase, who was already at the window, looking out through the curtains. "They're here," he muttered. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. I didn't respond. I just walked over to the door, my heart hammering in my chest, my thoughts a blur. They couldn't get in. Not now. Not after everything I had done. I positioned myself near the window, the view of the driveway framed in the faint light of the street lamps. Through the heavy curtains, I saw them pull up, headlights off, parking across the street. Declan was the first to get out, followed by Felix and Tiffany, her phone already up, recording the scene like some sort of twisted reality show. "Felix, we're about to reclaim justice," I heard her say, her voice crackling with false enthusiasm. "This is what standing up for yourself looks like." I clenched my fists. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. They were about to walk into their own undoing, and they didn't even know it. Felix moved first, a heavy set of bolt cutters in his hand. The cold metal glinted in the moonlight as he approached the gate, his face a mask of arrogance and anger. The sound of the bolt cutters snapping around the lock echoed in the quiet night, and my pulse quickened. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. Get ready, I whispered to Chase, though I was already moving toward the door. Is everyone in place? I asked, my voice low but steady. I didn't wait for a response, knowing everyone would be in position. The mayor, the historical society president, Sheriff Brody, all of them, here to witness what was about to happen. I moved to the door, my hand hovering just above the knob. I could hear them outside, could feel their presence like a weight on my chest. Then, Felix's voice cut through the night. Harper, open up, this is my house now. I could feel the anger in his words, but it didn't faze me. They thought they had control. They thought they could just walk in and take over. But they didn't know that I had set the perfect trap. I swung the door open, stepping into the entryway. My heart pounding in my ears. The cold air rushed in, but I barely noticed. My eyes locked on Felix as he approached the door, the bolt cutters still in his hands, ready to break down whatever stood in his way. But he didn't expect what came next. The door swung wide, revealing the guests, all of them standing in the great room, their faces a mix of confusion and shock. Felix froze. His eyes darted from one face to another, and I saw the realization hit him. This wasn't just a house anymore. This wasn't just about my family. This was about the law. He looked at me, his face turning red. What the hell is this? Felix, Sheriff Brody's voice rang out, calm and authoritative. You're under arrest. Felix's mouth dropped open in disbelief. What? This is my house. I have a lease. Felix, Brody said, stepping forward. That lease is forged. And you've got more to answer for than just that. Tiffany's phone was still recording, but I could see the fear creeping across her face. The reality of the situation was setting in. The video she had been hoping would make her a hero was now a damning record of her family's crimes. I watched as Felix's expression shifted from anger to desperation, but it was too late. Brody took another step forward, placing a hand on Felix's shoulder. You've committed breaking and entering, and we've got more than enough evidence to prove it. Declan, who had been standing in the background, now stepped forward, trying to play the calm, reasonable father. This is a misunderstanding, he began, but the words died on his tongue when Brody turned to him. You're not going anywhere, Mur. Lawson, Brody said, pulling out his handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy, forgery, and fraud. I stood there, watching it all unfold. For once, I felt like I had won. The weight of everything that had happened, the years of manipulation, the countless betrayals, finally lifted. Felix's face twisted with anger, but it was no use. His time was up, and the law was on my side. The silence that followed the arrests was almost louder than the chaos before. Felix and Declan were hauled away in separate squad cars, their faces pressed to the windows, their eyes wide with disbelief. I stood in the doorway, watching them go, my heart still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline from the last hour still coursing through me. I could hear the soft murmur of the guests behind me, some whispering to each other, others still in shock. No one had expected this. No one had known it would go this far. I hadn't expected it to go this far, either. But now it was over. At least, I thought it was. Sheriff Brody stood beside me, his hands still on his belt, his expression calm but measured. He had done what he was supposed to do. He had followed the law, even when it wasn't easy. But there was a heaviness in his eyes as he watched the squad cars pull away. He wasn't just dealing with criminals tonight. He was dealing with family. My family. You did the right thing, he said, his voice low, almost sympathetic. You know that, right? I nodded but didn't respond. There was no right or wrong in this. There was just the truth. And the truth was that my family had been playing games with my life for too long. As the sound of the police cars faded into the distance, I felt the weight of everything, every lie, every manipulation, every moment I had spent running from them, all settle into my bones. I had done it. I had finally stood up to them. But even now, as the victory hung in the air, it didn't feel like enough. I wasn't sure what would make it feel enough. Maybe seeing them locked away for good. Maybe watching them lose everything they had tried to take from me. But I wasn't sure. I glanced over at the crowd still gathered in the living room. They were all staring at me now, their faces a mixture of sympathy and awe. The mayor, the Historical Society president, and even Sheriff Brody were still there, watching me like they were waiting for me to say something. I cleared my throat and straightened up. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Thank you all for being here. I know this isn't the New Year's celebration you expected, but I'm glad you were here. It means more than I can say." There was a quiet murmur of agreement from the crowd. Some of them nodded, others gave small smiles. The mayor stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Harper, I don't know if you realize this, but what you did tonight wasn't just about saving your home," he said, his voice warm. "You've exposed something much bigger. This town needs people who are willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And you've done that." I felt my chest tighten at his words. I wasn't sure if I was strong or just desperate. Maybe both. But I wasn't ready for accolades. Not yet. I had a long way to go before I could fully let go of the fear, the anger, the uncertainty. Chase stepped beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I didn't need words. I just needed him there. I nodded, looking around at the faces in the room. "We're not done yet," I said quietly, almost to myself. "This is just the beginning." There was a pause as everyone in the room processed what I meant. A quiet understanding passed between us. They weren't here just to watch the show. They were here to help me fight. And I wasn't going to stop fighting now. As the last of the guests began to leave, one by one, I took a deep breath and turned toward the door. The police were wrapping up, making sure everything was documented, everything was in place. And as much as I wanted to collapse into the comfort of my own bed, I knew I couldn't let up now. There were still things to handle. Legal battles. Court dates. The damage my family had done wouldn't just go away because they were behind bars. I stood by the door as Sheriff Brody made his final rounds. His boots heavy on the wooden floor as he approached me. His expression softened when he saw me standing there alone, looking out at the dark driveway. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "Yeah, I just need some time." He didn't say anything else. He just gave me a look that said he understood, before stepping out into the cold night. I watched him leave, and for the first time that evening, I felt the weight of everything I had been carrying slip away, just a little. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, I had won. And for the first time in years, I could finally take a breath. As I turned and walked back into the living room, I looked around at the space I had fought so hard to protect. Blackwood Manor was mine again. Not just in name, but in spirit. And that was something I would never let anyone take from me. The garden bloomed in bursts of color as spring crept its way into Oak Haven, the scent of fresh earth and lilacs filling the air. Blackwood Manor stood proud behind me, its towering stone walls bathed in the soft morning light. The world felt quieter now, peaceful in a way that made me realize how much I had been living on the edge before. I sat on the wrought iron bench in the garden, Barnaby resting by my feet, his gray muzzle lifting slightly as a breeze ruffled his fur. He had healed in ways I hadn't expected. His limp, though still present, was less pronounced now, his eyes calmer. We both had a long road ahead, but we were finally moving forward. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the smell of the garden's blossoms, and I opened my laptop. Scrolling through the restoration proposals for the carriage house. The work had never felt less urgent. Once it had been all I could think about, restoring Blackwood Manor to its former glory, keeping the history alive. But now, as I clicked through the pages of estimates and plans, I realized how much of my heart had been tied up in something I'd been running from. This place wasn't just a project anymore. It was home, and I had earned it. Behind me, I heard the soft crunch of gravel, and I looked up to see Chase walking toward me, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a faint smile on his face. "You're still working?" he asked, dropping down onto the bench beside me. "I'm always working," I said with a smile, though it felt like the first time in a long while that it didn't feel like a grind. The words had lost their edge, their weight. I looked at him and realized how much he had become a part of this place, of my life. "Anything interesting?" Chase asked, leaning over to look at my screen. I closed the laptop, glancing at him. "Not really, just figuring out what comes next." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, a small laugh escaping me. "I don't know. It's all kind of quiet now. Everything feels done. It's supposed to feel done," Chase said softly, his eyes meeting mine. "You've fought. You've won. And now, you're free to make it your own." I felt the weight of his words sink in. I had spent so much time waiting for the next shoe to drop, always looking over my shoulder, wondering when the other shoe would fall. But now, standing here in the garden, with the wind gently brushing through the trees, I finally understood. I was free. "I guess I am," I said, feeling the peace settle in my bones. He reached out, taking my hand gently in his thumb brushing against my skin. "You've earned it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed his hand, a simple gesture that felt like everything I needed right now. I had never let anyone in, never trusted anyone enough to be vulnerable. But with Chase, it felt different. He wasn't asking for anything, and I didn't have to prove anything. He was just here, in the same way the Manor had stood by me all those years. "Chase," I started, my voice steady but filled with something that made me realize I was finally saying it aloud. "I'm not scared anymore. Not of them. Not of losing this place. Not of being alone." He smiled, his eyes soft. "You don't have to be." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly believed it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calm moments, quiet conversation, the sounds of Barnaby's paws tapping against the stone floor as he ambled around the garden, the faint chirping of birds overhead. I could feel the weight of everything, my parents, the betrayal, the fear fading into the background. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle above, I sat on the front steps, looking out at the property. It was hard to believe everything had changed. Hard to believe that the house I had once feared losing was now mine, and not just in name. I had fought for this. I had fought for myself. And as I sat there, with Chase by my side and the world at peace, I realized something important. The battles I had fought with my family, the pain they had caused, had all led me here. To this moment. To this place. And that was all I needed. This was the life I had built. The gate, the walls, the locked doors. They weren't just to keep others out. They were to protect what was mine. What I had fought for. And for the first time, I understood that I wasn't just protecting Blackwood Manor. I was protecting myself. Chase leaned over, his hand brushing against mine as we sat in silence, the quiet comfort of his presence washing over me. "We're not done, are we?" he asked, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. "No," I said, my voice steady and confident. "But it's our fight now, and we're in this together." I felt the shift, the subtle realization that I wasn't alone anymore, that everything I had feared was finally behind me, and whatever came next, I was ready. "Yeah," I said, squeezing his hand again, the words hanging in the air between us. "We're ready." And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely at peace,